Hello?
Hey, there you are. Okay, perfect. All right. So Matteo, thank you for coming on the show. It's great to speak with you today, and I appreciate you making the time. Your company is one that got my attention some time ago. Some notable VCs and athletes have been talking about it. The company is called Eight Sleep, and you guys describe yourselves as not a mattress company, but rather focused on sleep fitness. So for everyone tuning in, it would be great if you could just kind of give an overview on the company to start things off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eight Sleep is the first sleep fitness company. We are really focused on improving your sleep performance, your sleep efficiency with technology. And so we developed and built the Pod, which is the most advanced smart mattress in the market. And is a mattress that can heat and cool during the whole night to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep for longer, and wake up more refreshed. And we also track all your biometrics as you sleep, heart rate, respiration, and sleep itself.
Right. And I understand you have a pretty interesting background, atypical for a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm familiar with. You started in law and grew up in Italy and found your way over to becoming an entrepreneur here in the States. It'd be great to hear about what growing up in Italy was like, how moving to the United States was a little bit different, and just kind of some of the learnings that you've had along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Italian, so I grew up in a small city in northern Italy. It's a city of 100,000 people. It was mainly built around the 1200, even earlier. So we have walls from the Middle Ages surrounding the city and a castle in the middle of the city. So it is not the typical thing. The typical thing you would think a tech entrepreneur comes from. But I graduated in law. Then I started working with two of the largest law firms in the world, both based in UK. Became an entrepreneur in Europe. Sold first company. Started the same business in the US. It was in energy, renewable energy and solar. I sold that business, and then is when I started Eight Sleep.
So basically, you grew up in sort of an ancient city,
Yep.
came to want to become a lawyer first and then an entrepreneur second, and were attracted to solar energy, which is obviously cutting edge in energy, and then uh, kind of wanting to pave the way for the cutting edge innovations in sleep, which really hadn't existed from my perspective until Eight Sleep kind of led the way. How did you come to be interested in solar and then eventually sleep?
Yeah. So honestly, when I look back a bit, I was lucky, but I'm also proud of the topics that I have picked. And so in solar, as a lawyer, I was really focused on what is called project financing. So we were working on very large deals, financing deals to build the largest solar plants. And that is when I saw an opportunity and I started my own company with my co-founder at the time. And obviously that had an impact and has an impact on climate change. So I'm really proud of the time I invested, the time of my life I invested on climate change and making solar bigger. And then the second topic is sleep. Yes, but sleep is really the core pillar of health. And so when I think about what I'm doing is hopefully I'm helping the world or people in the world to live a healthier life through better sleep. And so I'm proud of that as well. Hopefully in the future, people will be able to live longer and healthier lives because of what we are building today.
Yeah, it's interesting. You started with kind of a planet perspective and have come very much personal in terms of health through sleep. You mentioned that you started the solar company with a co-founder, I believe you said. I understand that your current company, Eight Sleep, you co-founded along with your wife as well as a friend or two. Would be great to hear how those two experiences have kind of contrasted in terms of I don't know who you started with the previous company with, but I know there's, some cautionary tales about starting a company with your wife or your best friend. But there's also got to be great benefits. So it'd be really cool to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, so the first two companies I started them with the same co-founder. Then as I switched to sleep and health and technology, I started with other co-founders, and one of them is my wife. It's tricky, meaning it's not something that would work for probably most of the couples. It works really well for us, and we found our own balance. I was actually being interviewed yesterday in a podcast, and I was telling the story where Alex is the name of my wife, and so we use WhatsApp for personal messages and Slack for professional messages. And so sometimes we are chatting on Slack, and maybe I'm saying, oh, we need to change these and push harder to move faster, or things like that, for the company. But then in the WhatsApp, I'm asking, okay, what are we going to have for dinner? Or other times we are, it's late in the evening, we are on the couch. And so we have this rule where I cannot start talking about work because we need to treat each other as a colleague, right? But I can still Slack her. And so sometimes I'm Slacking her while we are on the same couch, and I can see the phone vibrating because of my Slacks. But we don't talk directly about the topic until the following morning.
That's pretty funny. I haven't heard such explicit rules, and granted, I haven't talked about this concept with too many people. But is there anything else that's really helped you guys to manage it? Because it seems like what you do have going is working pretty well.
Yeah, so I think the core things is really having these two different chats. And so in one chat we talk about personal stuff. In the other one we talk about professional stuff. Second, this rule that after a certain time, this rule that we need to treat each other as a colleague. And so you are not expected to be every night with a colleague at 10 p.m. Being able to talk. And so you can Slack a colleague, but you need to use the same tools. Another thing that is funny that we do is maybe right now with COVID, maybe sometimes we are traveling or we are working from home, right? And we never join obviously from the same computer. Everyone joins from his own computer, and we treat each other in a video call like if we were in two completely different cities or homes, like if we were colleagues. So hopefully, our real colleagues and our teams respect that because we create a real wall between our personal and professional life.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, and it sounds like it'll continue to work. It certainly worked so far, at least from the outside looking in. I'd like to talk about when you were getting started, and I do want to obviously spend a lot of the conversation talking about sleep and what you guys are doing with 8 Sleep. But earlier on, when you were just starting the company, I read that you had applied to Y Combinator 3 separate times, the first 2 being rejected, and finally getting through on the 3rd time. I don't know how popular a story that is, but to me, it certainly shows persistence, which I think is probably, at least it's been a large part of what's enabled me to be successful. And I think it's probably a defining trait of a lot of entrepreneurs. So would love to hear the context around that.
Yeah, that is another funny story. We applied twice. We always got rejected. And then randomly, we got introduced to a YC partner, and he said, at the time we just completed our crowdfunding campaign, which has been quite successful. So he said, you should apply. Hardware is important right now, is a hot topic, so you guys should apply. And so we were really uncertain because obviously to apply for YC, you want to do it well and it takes time. And so we were now there wondering, we just already got rejected twice. It's not probably worth to spend another 2, 3, 4, 5 days to really prepare for the thing. And so we were almost not applying anymore. And then really the last day we say, okay, let's do it, but let's just do it in a day. And we did everything the same day. You also had to record the video, things like that. And then we got admitted. And honestly, for us, both at the personal level, because of the friendships we have built, but also as a company, has been a game changer. So we were resilient and lucky at the same time.
Yeah, it speaks to, I think, your story, not only persistence, but with saying that you completed the third time around in a day, and that was the one that ended up being successful. I think, to me, it speaks to the old adage that perfect is the enemy of good, and sometimes you just want to get something done quickly, and it can end up being just as good as if you spend a lot of time kind of second guessing and refining things. Did that play any factor, you think, in the success? And also, is that something that you think about at all in terms of 8 sleep, in terms of being perfect, or rather sacrificing being perfect in order to kind of get things done satisfactorily?
Yeah, definitely. It's always a thin line, but I mean, my own picture in our Slack channel is the word move fast. So I'm a big believer in move fast, and not just for the sake of moving fast, but for in order to learn as fast as possible, so you can adjust things. In a startup, a lot of times you don't know what is going to work and what is not, and so the faster you move, the faster you learn. At the same time, so you need to be able to maintain a very high quality bar. And so these are two opposite metrics, and it's up to each of us to really find the perfect balance.
Right. Well, you're certainly moving a lot faster now. I know it took a while maybe to raise some of the early capital, going from the crowdfunding through YC and everything. Uh, but I understand you've raised about $70 million to date. Correct me if that's wrong, from a few different venture capitalists and angels and athletes alike. Would love to hear kind of the story of the fundraising trail so far, and then we'll dig into the product a little bit more.
Yeah, so we raised a family and friends round in the very early days. Then we raised money immediately after YC. It was a pretty sizable seed round. Then we did a Series A and a Series B1 and B2. We were lucky during our journey to be able to attract some of the greatest investors, obviously YC, and then Khosla Ventures with Keith Rabois and Delian, and then Founders Fund with Stray. So we're really backed by I would say tier one investors, which is great. It becomes really valuable, in particular during your board meetings, because having these people sitting in your board, they really help to think strategically and think in the proper way about all the key topics that we want to discuss when we meet.
What's something that you've learned from Keith or from Delian, having them actively involved with the company?
A lot. I think the importance of focus, the importance of hiring the right people, but also they really push us to be really deep in our strategic thinking, right? So they have the best interest of the company. I think if they disagree with something, they have no problems to tell you. If they think you're not doing great in any area, they have no problems to tell you. So we have a very direct relationship. And I think on our side, as board members and founders, we take feedback in a very constructive way, and then we are good at acting very quickly and adjusting things. But then obviously at the same time, we have our own opinion and we have our own vision. But the intellectual quality, the IQ of the discussion in our boards, I think is extremely high because of the people that we have giving their advice.
That certainly sounds like a nice advantage. So let's move over to talking about the company now. You guys are focused on sleep fitness, like we said, not just a mattress. Mattress is kind of the first phase. Really, it's about the data that you're collecting and using that data to optimize people's sleep. And everyone's a little bit different. So could you talk a little bit about that data collecting? I understand so far you've collected millions of hours of sleep data from people really all across the world. I don't know how many countries you're up to now, but a lot of them. So you should have a pretty well-rounded data set on what works and what doesn't. And I'm assuming that's kind of guiding your product roadmap to some extent. Would love to just hear how you've used data to date and how you kind of plan on using it moving forward to enhance people's sleep.
Yeah, we're really becoming one of the largest sleep labs in the world, if not the largest. And the reason is we have already collected several million hours of sleep. And so the value of this is really to be able to start seeing patterns and things that impact the quality of sleep. And then potentially in the future to be able to provide recommendations, personalized recommendations to help people sleep better. We just sent a notification last week to each of our users where we were telling them where do they rank in sleep quality compared to similar peers of the same gender and the same age group. That was really successful. A lot of people were tweeting about that. A lot of customers were sharing their ranking. And so these are the type of opportunities that we are unlocking. We have a scientific advisory board with some of the best professors in the world, professors from Stanford, Harvard, UPenn, Mount Sinai. And one of the core reasons why they were so eager to join us and to join our scientific advisory board is the amount of data that we are able to collect per day is probably comparable to what, in the past would probably take 20, 30, 50 years to be able to collect something similar. So hopefully the fact that we have all these sleep and health data will help us to improve the health, longevity, and productivity of our customers in the future.
Is the peer ranking data that you guys were sending around, is that compared to the network that you have on your mattresses, or is that some sort of broader comparison?
No, it's compared to the network on our smart mattresses, on the pods, on our technology. But now you start talking about several thousand people. So you see real patterns. We have seen real patterns during COVID, how COVID has impacted the quality of sleep of our users. I also tweeted about that, what happened in March and then how people recovered. Recently, there was a heat wave in San Francisco, and we have seen how people in California and in San Francisco were sleeping at much cooler levels than the rest of the United States, because in our bed you can regulate the temperature. And so we were able to see, and I shared that on Twitter as well, how much colder people in California were sleeping compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I saw some of that. I saw a graphic on New York that showed, I think, people's sleep scores were down about 10% at the beginning of lockdown. I saw the California piece on the temperature that you mentioned. It looks like people are sleeping actually a half hour more during the week, if that's right. And then on the weekends, they're not sleeping in quite as differently versus the week as they were before COVID. So none of these are, I guess, most of them are pretty intuitive, but it's got to be pretty interesting to see all of it in hard data on such a wide user base.
Exactly. And I think patterns is really the most interesting thing, right? And yeah, what you said is absolutely true. So people are sleeping more since COVID, and there is less difference between work days and weekends in terms of the time, the wake up time.
Right. And so you mentioned temperature, the differences that you were seeing people sleeping a bit colder during the heat wave in California. That's obviously your guys' kind of main value add at this point, in addition to the tracking and all the data. The actual thing that's helping so far the most seems to me to be the ability to control not only the temperature of your bed, but the temperature on both sides of the bed, so that if you're sleeping with a partner, 50% of partners, I think you've said, have different preferences, and you can accommodate those preferences with the pod. So I guess, what are the major learnings that you've had from the temperature modification thus far? And there's obviously a number of other factors that go into someone getting a good night's sleep. Would be curious to hear kind of what's on the roadmap in terms of what's next.
Yeah, the temperature regulation is the biggest factor impacting the quality of your sleep outside sleep medical disorders. And so being able to sleep in a thermoregulated environment can improve your sleep. In particular, there are already clinical studies, and you can read it also on Why We Sleep from Matthew Walker, the book. But there are already clinical studies proving that through thermoregulation, you can fall asleep faster, you can get more deep sleep, and you can also wake up more refreshed. So if you look at what our customers are saying, close to 90% of our customers are reporting better sleep with the pod. Most of the people, 15 to 30%, it depends how you want to look at that, they report more restful sleep. And so that is a sleep with less wake ups or toss and turns in the middle of the night. So we really effectively improve the quality of your sleep. We also have evidence that we help them to fall asleep faster. And then through temperature, we wake you up naturally without sound. So you can heat or cool the bed at the temperature that will slowly take you out of deep sleep or REM. And so by the time your alarm goes off, you never feel groggy and you're already woken up.
Right. I saw that. I think you call it the gentle rise alarm. Is that right?
Exactly. So with the gentle rise, you leverage two things. You leverage temperature and you leverage vibration. And so we can heat or cool your side of the bed, and we can vibrate your side of the bed, and you wake up naturally without sound, which means first you wake up without feeling groggy, and second, you can wake up without bothering your partner.
Yeah, it sounds like a really nice way to wake up. I know the difference for me in using an alarm versus just waking up from sunlight is night and day, no pun intended. And then even just using an alarm, for most of my life, obviously I've used a regular alarm. And then for a while I was using Sleep Cycle app, or I think it's now a bedtime feature or something in Apple phones that wakes you up with like a progressively rising volume. And even just that compared to an alarm that goes from 0 to 100 makes a noticeable difference for kind of like how startled I am when I wake up, or how kind of easy it feels. And I imagine that just doing it with temperature to increase someone's heart rate, and then I guess it sounds like a little vibration as well. Sounds, as long as the vibration is not too jarring, it sounds like a pretty nice way to wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we discover by talking to our customers is majority of the people, they hate the sound alarm, and they hate when the sound alarm goes off while they are in deep or REM. And so we really created a smart alarm that wakes you up naturally without sound and just through vibration and temperature.
And I guess the nice part is for you, as you're creating all these innovations, I imagine you're testing some of them on yourself. And at the same time, the better you do for your company, kind of the better your life will be in more ways than one.
Absolutely.
Another thing that sounded interesting that I've heard you talk about on a couple other podcasts was, people have compared 8 Sleep to basically the Tesla of sleep. And Tesla obviously is known to be working on autopilot features that are getting better every day. Hopefully one day can be totally autonomous, which would be a lot safer. And I'm a proponent of that. I imagine that you guys could also offer through software an update to the beds that uses all of the data that you're collecting in mass, and also, on the individual customer, to kind of allow them to turn on autopilot within their bed to drive optimal sleep according to kind of the insights that you guys have, and to be able to test different temperatures and temperature changes and times for waking up and all of that, to kind of take it out of their hands. And instead of, selecting the temperature, the bed just kind of knows what's best for them. Is that something that you guys are doing yet or plan to be doing soon?
Yes, we're working on that, and so you absolutely nail it. So we are really leveraging. We love when people define us now the Tesla of sleep. That is really what we will love to become. And like a Tesla, so first your pod gets automatic software updates. The pod is Wi-Fi connected, and so you wake up in the morning, and when you come back in the night, your pod could have a new feature, and that just magically happen through a software update. And second is the pod becomes smarter and smarter, both because it's collecting your data, and so it becomes more personalized. And second, because our algos in the backend on the cloud, they become smarter. And so the result is that we are really building this sort of autopilot for temperature. And so temperature is and will become smarter, meaning that it will auto-adjust based on your biometrics, on your heart rate or your respiration and your sleep stages, to really making sure that we can maximize your sleep efficiency. If you fast forward 10 years, we have a vision that is based on two pillars. The first one is, what if you could sleep only 6 hours and get more rest than when you were sleeping 8 hours? What if we can improve your sleep performance by 25%? And second is, can we transform your bed in your doctor? Can going to bed become more valuable than going to your doctor for a health checkup? And the way that is because we have so much space in the bed, we want to embed as many sensors as possible. So every night we check your health and we let you know if there is anything that is outside normal.
So I know you must be familiar, obviously, with the Aura Ring. I've heard it highly recommended, and was looking at getting one a little while ago. And I've since come to the conclusion that I'm probably not going to get one. And transparently, I'm going to get an 8-sleep bed. Do you have any way, though, of tracking during the day some of the data that could be useful, paired with the data that you're collecting overnight? It seems like you guys have basically, call it a third of people's lives where you're collecting probably more data than any other company. But the rest of the day is somewhat blind. So have there been any thoughts as to integrations externally or things internally that you can do to get that extra visibility and make it all a little bit more useful?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And let me start from our philosophy. So we are a non-wearable, and we always wanted to be a non-wearable. And the reason is we believe that people get tired to wear a certain product unless it's extremely impactful. And so probably you have seen churn data of wearables and what usually happens after 6 or 8 months. In our case, substantially every customer is still using the pod after a year, which is probably the only other device that you're really still using after a year is probably your own computer or iPad or phone. So our retention is insanely high, and the reason is you don't have to do anything. You just go to bed as you did every day for the rest of your life, and we will be there having your back. Then specifically about the day, because obviously we cover 1/3 of your life, which is the night. For the day, we're integrated with Apple Health, so any data that comes from Apple Health and or your Apple Watch can already be connected with 8-sleep. And then we are working also on a couple of partnerships with other amazing companies that they cover the rest of the day for you. And we are exploring how can we share your sleep data with them, obviously subject to your consent, and how they can share your data with us subject to your consent. And when I'm talking about sharing data, I'm talking about you seeing your, I don't know, nutrition or fitness data in your 8Sleep app, or seeing the 8Sleep data in the app that you use for fitness. And again, as I already said, all these would be subject to a decision of the customers and them approving the integration.
And do you have to be conscious about kind of being the one to own the most of that data, in the sense of what you give out, you expect kind of in return? Because obviously, like we've talked about, the sleep data is incredibly important, and there's only one mattress that people can sleep on. Some of this other stuff might be not quite as valuable or not quite as unique. So are you thinking about owning kind of the valuable piece in any sense?
I think the key thing for us is obviously the data is relevant because of the patterns. But I think the major difference between 8Sleep and any wearable outside the form factor is really that it's not just about the data for us, but the data is what drives an action that we take through temperature to effectively improve your sleep. I think one of the challenges that most of the wearables have is, okay, all this data is great, but so what? And outside just telling you what is happening, they cannot really help you improve, or they cannot directly improve your fitness or your nutrition or your sleep. 8Sleep is the only company that can do it, because through temperature and environment regulation, based on your data, we can personalize all these factors in order to enhance your sleep quality. And because we have no competition in that, that is where I think we have the strongest moat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now moving a bit on from the product and talking more generally about sleep, it'd be nice to hear, obviously, I imagine in the beginning, part of creating this product was that you wanted to sleep better yourself, and imagined that a lot of people would benefit from doing the same. So would love to hear your personal experience through the development of 8Sleep to improve your own sleep, and maybe some anecdotes that you've heard from other people that are most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we are helping so many people, and every day as we collect NPS or feedbacks, we can see that automatically on our Slack, right? And so we have helped a lot of couples because they have different temperature preferences, right? Around 50% of the couples, they fight around temperature because one person prefers it hot and the other prefers it cold. We have helped a lot of athletes to recover faster. So some of them, they love it cold, some others, they love it warm. But in general, through thermoregulation, they can personalize their settings in order to recover faster. We have seen people with panic attacks in the middle of the night, and our data was extremely valuable for them, because then they could share with their doctor at what time it happened and how their heart rate was impacted. Myself, in my specific case, I have restless legs. That is this feeling that you need to really get out of bed in the middle of the night, walk a bit, because it's like having cramps. And so it was really helpful for me to be able to monitor how often and when this happens, and then to play with temperature in order to reduce these episodes. And then we have also seen moms reaching out because they wanted to buy our product for their kids because they have epileptic attacks. And so by being able to monitor what happens in the middle of the night, it's something that will help them to just feel safer. And they were asking me if we foresee in the future to send any real-time notification in case we see any of these episodes. And we're really just at the beginning, because again, the way the pod is designed is we already have all the hardware features. And so it's just a matter of bandwidth and developing all the software and the algorithms that we need to monitor and notify most of the things.
For personal reasons, I'm curious, do you have any stories of people improving issues with back pain from the mattress?
Yeah, absolutely. So on that specifically, obviously the warm, you can warm your bed, in particular during the winter, particularly if you are stiff, or even in the morning. I have seen people doing meditation in bed and leveraging temperature. But in general, in particular, the warming is so cozy and so relaxing for your back that when it hurts, it works really well. Then there are other people that instead that they prefer it extremely cold. In particular, I would say the majority of our customers, they like to get into a bed that is really, really cold in the night. And then they set the different temperature levels for the following steps of the night.
Are there cases where you mentioned kind of some people prefer warm, some people prefer cold, at least, when they're getting into bed and then when they're waking up in it, I guess during the sleep, as long as you're not waking up, it shouldn't matter too much consciously. But are there findings where people prefer a certain temperature, but it turns out that another temperature is actually better for them? So that, when you do roll out this sort of autopilot, it may not be something that someone intuitively thought was their favorite thing or might be best for them, but it's something that actually, by the data shows that they're sleeping better because of it.
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and it's actually something we're working on. And so on one side, when you join, you will be able to just receive a general recommendation for people of your age and gender about what are the optimal temperature settings. But our ML team and AI team is already working on personalized recommendations. And so after spending some time on the pod, we will be able to start to tell you at what temperature setting, for example, you can fall asleep the fastest. And so recommend you to eventually adjust the temperature setting to that level instead than the one you're using. Then obviously for temperature, there are other factors that are extremely important, like when did you train? Right? If you train in the past 2 hours, probably you're dissipating more heat than usual. Obviously, there could be a heat wave. And so it's really important that we develop this AI intelligence where the bed understands all these different factors and is able to provide the perfect personalized recommendation for you.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good way to go. I want to go back to something you said, I guess one of the two pillars of your mission, the latter being to make the bed basically better than a doctor, or at least comparable in terms of the value you get from the data and everything that it's gaining from being able to collect that during your sleep. And the other being to basically get to a place where people are getting as much rest in 6 hours per night as they currently do from 8. This is something I thought about a couple of years ago. I spent a lot of time, for better or worse, thinking about kind of the fundamentals of life and especially activities that I spend kind of a lot of time by default doing. And none of those are greater, of course, than sleep. So I kind of figured that, the common wisdom was you need to sleep 8 hours a night, but I had never really put that to the test. And so for a while I thought, I could get 25% of the time I'm putting in sleep back if I just sleep 6 hours a night, and let's actually test it and see if I, might feel just the same, if not better. And that was kind of a failed test. I felt pretty awful for a sustained period of time and then gave it up pretty quickly. But the concept of actually being able to do that and to have it work seems very feasible to me if it's a higher quality sleep for 6 hours versus a lower quality for 8 hours. And so that makes a lot of sense as a mission. I also understand, though, that certain people are kind of genetic freaks and can kind of get away with that sort of stuff. Have you encountered any of these types of outliers from your data that they can already kind of sleep 5 hours, 6 hours a night and be just as rested as someone with 8?
There are really, really few. And so they're really an exception. And it's tricky, meaning obviously that is where we want to be in 10 years. And we have some ideas of how we can improve your sleep efficiency to a point where that could be possible. That is not possible today And so if you reduce the amount of sleep today, you're just risking to impact your health and your longevity. And so I actually went the opposite direction since COVID, and I started sleeping 9 hours a day, every day. And all my biometrics are trending in a more positive direction. My heart rate at rest went down, my HRV went up, which is positive because it means you are more rested. I feel much more energetic during the whole day, and I have better focus on what really matters. So except these very few people, but they're really, really few, and there are a bunch of people that they think they have this special gene, but they don't really have it. The negative effects of sleep deprivation could be very harmful on your health in the long term. So you should pay a lot of attention.
So sleep deprivation, from personal experience as well as a lot of stories. I think it's an increasing narrative recently that sleep is important, and people are less praising, the concept of an all-nighter and people who work around the clock because their work may be becoming, or really is becoming, less efficient when they're doing those sorts of things. But I also understand that there's some negative repercussions, and I don't have a great understanding about it, but to sleeping longer than, the high side of what's a good amount of sleep. So call it 10 hours, 11 hours a night. Is that something that you can share a little bit more about as well?
Yeah, I mean, the perfect time usually is between 7 and 9 hours. That is the recommended amount of sleep today. And so that is what I usually recommend. What I always challenge people to do is try for a week to sleep 9 hours a day. And then you tell me how you feel. And let's say you were sleeping 8 hours a day, now you start sleeping 1 hour more per day times 7 days, that is 7 hours more in a week, which is like saying that you are sleeping one more night that week. And if you do that on a regular basis, you will notice that sleeping more is better than going on vacation.
That's pretty interesting. So you can kind of take a vacation in your own bed if you just prioritize sleep for a week.
Yeah, particularly when you feel really tired or overwhelmed, try to sleep more. And that is a hack to really substitute a vacation that maybe you cannot take during that time. And sometimes people tend to say, oh, I don't have the time. But I think if you start looking at the improvement in terms of focus and energy that you get during the day, you will recover that hour big time. Plus, you're living a healthier life.
Right. Another interesting concept that I've thought a bit about, never really experimented with yet, is using naps more often. There's even some people historically who have, claimed success by taking basically 2 different sleep periods throughout the day that in total are shorter, but they might sleep a few hours at night and then an hour or two kind of in the heart of the day. Are these kind of out there theories things that you've considered or tested or seen people test at all? So
there are 2 very different things. One is the naps, and the naps are one of the best things you can do for yourself and for your body. I used to do power naps, and the way I do it is I drink an espresso right before the nap, and then I nap for 20 minutes. By the time I wake up, the espresso kicks in, and so I feel super energetic. The beauty of the nap is you give time to your brain to reduce adenosine, which is why you feel tired. Is a substance that gets into your brain and makes you feel tired. And so you reduce the adenosine level. And at the same time, you also give time to your brain to really readjust the information that you have collected during that part of the day. Plus, in general, you let the body rest. So naps are great, and you should take them. They shouldn't be longer than 20, 30 minutes. Otherwise, you get into REM or deep sleep, And if you wake up, you feel groggy, and you feel groggy for the rest of the day. So they need to be really short, 20 to 30 minutes. Then polyphasic sleep is a different thing. There are a lot of theories about that, and one of the main theories is that should work for us because it comes from when we were still hunting thousands of years ago. We couldn't sleep for 8 hours in a row, and so polyphasic sleep was the way people were sleeping at the time. Human beings were sleeping at the time. I have tried it. The main problem is really social first, meaning sleep. At the end of the day, you still need to sleep at least 8 hours, right? And so if you sleep only 4 hours in the middle of the night and then 4 hours in the middle of the day, it's pretty awkward and it cuts your day in the middle. Second, usually when you sleep 8 hours, the first part of the night is about deep sleep and the second part of the night is about REM. And if you start accumulating sleep debt, your body always gives more time to deep sleep instead than REM. And so polyphasic sleep could have an impact on your sleep stages. And that is not good because you need close to 20% deep sleep and close to 20% REM. Deep sleep is usually more for your body to recover, while instead REM is more for your brain and the storage of information that you collected during the day. Brain information.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that the latter is a pretty out there theory, but just a simple 20-minute nap a day, I particularly like, as well as your power nap with the espresso, all kicking in when you wake up. It sounds like a pretty good way to start maybe the second half of your day.
Exactly. So usually if I nap, I try to nap around 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Don't do it too close to the time you go to bed. And that could be extremely powerful for your focus and energy for the rest of the day.
Right. So the last thing I want to talk about is related kind of from, zooming out a little bit to just overall health and overall longevity as it is affected by sleep, but other things as well. So I know you're pretty big into this type of stuff, beyond just sleep itself, monitoring nutrition, making sure to exercise. I think of longevity as having kind of a few core tenets, and I've had and plan to have more guests on the show who are actually working in the space of trying to reverse biological aging so that people can live substantially longer. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is go through kind of a few of these different facets that make people live healthier and hopefully a little bit longer, and hear kind of any beliefs or practices that you have within those realms, starting with exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super into longevity. Is a topic I really, really like, and I spend a lot of time reading about that, books and medical and clinical studies. At the end of the day, there are, health and longevity are based on 3 core pillars. One is sleep, and is really the foundation. Second is nutrition, and so you need to pay attention to what you eat, and not just in order to be, skinny and in shape, but also to avoid inflammation. And so the bottom line is you need to avoid glucose spikes, because glucose spikes create inflammation, and inflammation is what is behind all the main diseases and illnesses you can think of. And then the third is training, as you were saying. And the one I use the most, the type of training I do the most is what is called HIIT, which is high intensity interval training. And the concept is to really spike your heart rate as high as possible, let it drop and spike it again. And the beauty of high intensity interval training is that it's specifically designed to really train your heart rate, which, as we all know, is one of the main point of failure of our body. And you're also able to train in a very healthy way in a short period of time. So I usually do a 1 hour, but you could even just do a 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes training, and that is extremely good for your heart rate. And so in a very short period of time, you still do all that you need.
Do you use anything, any apps or any certain activities that you prefer for the HIIT training?
For the heat specifically, I use Active, I use Peloton, I used to go to Barry's, and then obviously after doing for a couple of years, sometimes I just do it on my own. But these are the apps I use the most. There is another app called Zones that is really helpful because it helps you monitor your heart rate. And in general, I use my Apple Watch, and through that, I can easily monitor my heart rate levels. And I really try to look at the heart rate at rest, HRV, which is heart rate variability. And based on that, I decide how hard I should train every day. Heart rate recovery. So from a spike in heart rate, how much does it drop within a minute and 2 minutes, and so on.
Right. And so the third pillar that you mentioned alongside sleep and exercise was nutrition. And you mentioned glucose monitoring being the key there. I think you use levels I've seen on Twitter. And I'm actually speaking with Josh, one of the co-founders, tomorrow, coincidentally. Would love to hear what you've thought of that product and how that's helped giving you insights into nutrition, or even how some of the things you do during the day in terms of exercise might be affecting your metabolism.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. So first of all, I'm on a keto diet, and I fast almost every day. Usually during the week, I fast 23 hours. I never know if you should say 23 hours or 24 hours, but substantially I have one meal a day. And then instead, during the weekend, I usually do the 16-8. So 16 hours of fasting, and then I eat within an 8-hour window. And then I started using levels. I wanted a CGM for a very long time, and then finally I discovered about them. And it was extremely interesting. So I discovered things like, I don't know, berries and watermelon, they create the same glucose spike that a pizza would create on my body. And so certain type of foods that I thought they were extremely healthy for my glucose and for my keto diet, they instead proved to not be that healthy. And so the bottom line is with levels, you can really learn how to personalize your diet and understand what type of food works best for you.
Right. So let's break that up a little bit. You mentioned the keto diet and the fasting. I'm a big believer in fasting. I feel great when I do it. I typically do 16-8 on weekdays, and kind of everything's out the window on the weekend for me. And during the week this year, I've started, when I'm doing the fasting, I'm also doing vegan and gluten-free, just because it seems like, it's not going to hurt. And I like to kind of be disciplined during the week, especially with diet. I think it's a good thing. But to your point, I have no idea if those are really beneficial or optimal for me. So the glucose monitoring certainly makes sense from that standpoint. I'm curious first about your keto diet, and then want to ask a bit about the fasting as well. But was keto something that you started before levels, and it's something that you've maintained throughout, despite maybe gaining some insights that certain things might not be good like you thought they were?
Yeah, I started the keto almost 2 years ago. So 3 years ago, I tried to go gluten-free and probably worked for a quarter. Then I stopped. And then around 6 to 9 months later, I started the keto. And I was able to find types of food that I like, and they're keto compliant. And so now, yeah, it has been 2 years that I'm on a keto diet. Obviously, from time to time, you cheat. It could be a day, or it could be a small period. But I would say really 95% of the time, I'm on a keto diet.
Yeah.
I found that extremely helpful for my energy and for my focus.
With all of these things, I think it's important. A lot of people try to go kind of cold turkey off whatever they're doing onto something that's really hard. And for me, and it's personal for everyone, but I found it super useful to break it up into weekdays and weekends.
Yeah.
And 5 days a week, I can do pretty much anything. If the 2 days, I can kind of not have to worry about it. And then it actually ends up being that during the week, you have a lot less choices, and that can be helpful too.
Exactly. And the other thing is important to say is I have seen people discovering interesting things with their CGM. And so fasting is not for everyone. In particular, 16/8 is already tough. And if you do the 24 hours is even tougher. And so you really need to make sure that before you start doing it, that your glucose levels are still good and they don't drop too much. And that is something you can see with your CGM. If you see that you have very good and healthy glucose levels, at that point you can start trying fasting, but you shouldn't do it otherwise.
Yeah, and people have asked me questions along those lines of, I get really dizzy. They'll say, I get really dizzy if I don't eat first thing when I wake up. And that's just, and am I doing something wrong? And I am not an expert, but my personal experience is like, well, I haven't had any of those issues. And it's the 16/8 for me personally is pretty easy. Maybe one day every 2 weeks, maybe I'll be kind of hungry when I wake up. Usually if I actually ate later the night before, kind of counterintuitively, but generally it's pretty easy for me. What's not easy is the 23-hour fast that you've spoken about. I've done it, a handful of times, but doing it every weekday seems tough for me, and it might just be a genetic difference. But would love to hear about how you went down that road, because obviously eating one meal a day is, eating 2 meals a day is uncommon enough, but one meal a day is super uncommon. And would love to hear kind of what motivated you to get there and what benefits you've seen from doing it.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, in the past, I tried even the 3 days, but I found that extremely painful. So for 3 days, I was not eating any solid food. I was just using some sort of juices or even just water. But I found that that was just too bad, and it was having an impact on my sleep because I was really craving and missing food. And after probably at the end of the second day, even mentally, was becoming too much of a pain. Um, and so I immediately understood that that was not an option for me. On the other side, the 16/8 is probably the one I would honestly recommend to most of the people. I don't see, I would say, a major improvement in doing the 24 hours. But what I like is if you think about the principles of fasting, which oversimplified is really give time to your body to work on itself without bothering it with digestion. I noticed that I could go straight to the 24 hours without, really craving food or feeling hungry. And so because of that, most of the times I'm in the zone working, I don't even think of food during the work days. And so I just go straight. And then mentally, it still helps me obviously to know that there is a good meal at the end of the day. I crave that, and that is sort of my reward for a day of hard work. And then during the weekend is different because I spend time maybe with my wife and maybe we go out for brunch, things like that. And so at that point I do the 16/8.
That sounds like a great approach. Does your wife do the fasting as well, the 23 hours during the week?
No, she does not. And the reason is she started monitoring her glucose levels. And so she saw that for her, it wouldn't be optimal to do fasting for a very long period of time. And so in her specific case, she eats more often. She tends to do the 16/8, but sometimes she adjusts based on the glucose levels.
We talked about nutrition. We talked about sleep. We just got finished talking about fasting, and before that, exercise. And I know you mentioned that there's a few main pillars to longevity from your perspective. And those are kind of the main ones for me as well. I'd throw fasting in as kind of the fourth, although it's pretty relevant to nutrition. You could kind of put them in the same bucket. But there's a few other factors that I think about that might not be as critical, but certainly seem to impact health and longevity. And I know that, or I understand from following your Twitter and reading a couple of things and listening to podcasts that you have some pretty unique approaches, or maybe not unique, but different than the majority approaches on a couple of these things. So the first one I want to talk about is, and this actually comes from a book I read recently from David Sinclair called Lifespan.
Yep.
Where did you read that, or you're familiar?
Yeah, I read it. I love that book.
Yeah, it was awesome, and hopefully I'll have him on the show at some point to talk about it more. But what he talks about, a factor that I had experimented with in the past, but don't have a consistent routine with, which is exposing yourself to really cold temperatures. So I used to live in an apartment building that had a cold plunge, which was really nice, and that was really easy for me. But cold showers are not quite as easy. Take a bit more discipline, and they're just less pleasant, I'd say. But I saw something about you taking kind of on and off cold and hot showers. Is that something that you believe in?
Yeah, I think it's huge. It's probably one of the greatest hacks. In particular, if you cannot train one morning, but you will still want to feel, energized. I would strongly suggest to do, I call them intermittent showers, even if it's not the proper name formally. But so I switch between hot and cold. Usually you should do 30 to 60 seconds, very hot, very cold, very hot, very cold. This will really create a thermal shock to your body, and it will also help with blood circulation. And more than anything, it wakes you up. I use it as I always do it, but is my hack if I didn't have a chance to train that morning and I have to go out. By doing this type of showers, I almost feel like if I had a training session.
Yeah,
And I also do it in the night. I recommend it a couple of hours before going to bed. It's really helpful.
I think I'll have to try that out because I've only tried just pure cold showers, and sometimes I think it's only human to want a warm shower, especially in the winter. But if you're switching off between hot and cold, that sounds a lot more palatable and you know, kind of in parallel to like high intensity interval training. I think the up and down, there seems to be something good there. So and your personal anecdote, it sounds like something worthwhile.
Thank you.
Another category is kind of things that people ingest, for lack of a better category name, like drugs and alcohol, but not just the larger drugs that people talk about, but the more common ones that are less of a stigma, such as alcohol and caffeine. So I personally am very conscious about caffeine, more recently alcohol, and generally drug use. My kind of guiding principle is like everything in moderation. And so nothing too often. And I don't drink coffee every day. I drink it like once a week, twice a week, if that. Do you have any principles around these things that you think about, or maybe you disagree that they even are a component at all?
Yeah, I stopped drinking 18 months ago. So I don't drink alcohol at all anymore. And I'm really happy with that choice. I found benefits in terms of sleep quality because alcohol has an impact on your sleep quality, on your sleep stages, on your HRV. So that was the main benefit, plus obviously digestion in general. The other thing that happens is when you drink, particularly at night, you tend to feel hotter, and so you would have to adjust your pod temperature, the temperature of your bed all the times in order to cool down your body. And in general, it's healthier. I mean, probably if you like, you can still have a glass of wine. There are some studies about that. But in general, I found it much easier for me to just stop drinking completely and living a healthier life without alcohol.
And how about caffeine?
Caffeine, I still take it because I'm Italian. I drink espresso, so I don't drink American coffee. I tend to have 3 espresso per day, one when I wake up, one in the middle of the morning, and one in the early afternoon. You don't want to so you want to stop drinking coffee at least 8 hours before going to bed, because the effect of coffee will be extended to 8 hours after the last sip of coffee.
Yeah, and you've got the Italian genes, so it's probably even more for me. I notice sometimes I'll have a coffee at like noon, which doesn't feel all that late, and try to go to bed at like 10:30, 11, and I can feel I'm a little bit wired. So part of it is if it didn't affect me so strongly, or if I was just responded a little bit differently, and it's personal for everyone, I might not believe so much in the moderation for that particular thing, but for me personally, I think it's been helpful to space it out a little bit. Lastly, I noticed you tweeted about a product from a company called Elysium that I'm familiar with for their Basis pill, which is like an NAD plus supplement. One of the things that David Sinclair studies, and one of the kind of prime candidates for something that could help people live longer with kind of constant supplementation or by another means of kind of regulation. What was are you at liberty to kind of talk about what you were trying from them, and whether that's something that's part of your routine, or whether there's any other supplements that you're taking regularly?
Yeah, so there is the Elysium. I take magnesium in the evening. It helps you to just relax and relax the muscles. I take melatonin from time to time, not every day because I don't want to create dependency. I take vitamin D. That is quite important for me. And then in general, another thing I do, which we didn't talk about, is I use a company, Let's Get Checked.com. So I run my blood analysis almost monthly or every other month. And so I monitor all the levels of vitamins and a lot of different factors in my body. And based on that, I can adjust the supplements and also my diet.
That's letsgetchecked.com, you said?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I'll have to check that as well. So lastly, I just want to mention there's one product, there's a bunch of products that you guys have on your website that are from other brands. I think it's great that you're recommending these products that are not even from your company, that just can help people pursue the overall mission of helping sleep and helping overall health. One of those products is called Hypervolt, I believe. And I had seen that on the website, and then coincidentally before we got on today, I was reading an article on ESPN about how the company was actually named after Kobe Bryant's shoe line, the Hyperdunks. I guess the inventor met Kobe in the early days of the product, and he kind of helped bring things along and was one of their earliest supporters. Is that a product that you've used yourself and enjoyed? And before we wrap up, is there anything else supplementally that we haven't talked about that's really helpful for you in just pursuing being overall healthier and living longer?
Yeah, I use the Hypervolt. I love their gun. It's pretty helpful. So I use it on my legs, I use it on my hips, and anywhere where it hurts after training. I also use the Normatec, the boots, a lot. I love to use them when I nap or an hour before going to bed. So the reason is they are compression boots, and they help you recover faster by accelerating the circulation of your blood. So both products are awesome.
That's great. Well, in closing, I do want to give you the last word to say anything you might want after I say this last piece. But I do want to thank you for sharing all of these tips and telling us more about 8 Sleep. anyone who wants to optimize their health certainly has a lot to chew on, and a lot of products to check out after, and practices to try after hearing some of the things you've suggested. So again, I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see how 8 Sleep grows in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.